The parents of the main character died during the battle between the evolving and mutating animals when he was 6 years old. Near the hospital of the city, Jay was the hero of this story. The young guy, Lee Haojan. Standing in the pouring rain, the young man studied the conclusion of the doctors regarding his diagnosis. And now Haojan himself was a peddler of a special ailment, a mutational disease. However, the guy vowed to help his sister fulfill the last desire of the mother, despite the disease, which leads to complete paralysis and death. After a couple of days in the suburbs, Jay Jesse Zheng made a briefing with his team, telling about the top 10 mutating animal beasts. The guy claimed that the animals did not pose a particular threat to them, and that if everyone would follow his orders, then by the evening, they would return home. Chen said that if the team had no questions, then that she began to perform work. Of all, Hao did not evolve Hao, so he was given the role of a porter. An ordinary person could join the hunting team only as a porter, which would follow supplies. The young man, who would collect useful materials from the animals, asked not to worry, since this was not his first sortie. Soon, the detachment commander attacked the first of the animals, Countess in the vicinity of the suburbs. While Zhen was operating with a dagger, his people dealt with monsters with his bare hands. Also, in addition to cold weapons, hunters also used magical abilities against the enemy. The porter, seeing how the hunt is going well, decided that the team would quickly cope with the assigned task. Reflecting on what a huge abyss was between hunters and people, Hao Zhen discovered something. The stones on the ground began to bounce strongly because of a sudden trembling, which should not have happened. The porter of the team wondered that there was something dangerous nearby, since animals of the first level could not cause an earthquake. Breaking through the thickets of forests, from behind the trees the creation of the earth, which was responsible for the trembling of the earth, emerged. A mutated beast, named the Titanic Snake, looked at the evolutionary ones. The girl from the detachment that the whole cowered with fear said that she saw such a creature on TV, that she had a 5th level. She repeated that they were not warned about such a thing, and that they would not be able to cope with such a monster. Hao Zhen shouted the team members so that they would not stand a pillar and rush from all their feet. The hunter, running away from the beast, informed her colleagues that someone had a cry to bring her to her senses. Having discovered that the prey eludes him, the mutated enemy burst into a wild cry. One of the team members notified their commander that snakes stop only when they eat. This thought of the subordinate prompted Zheni to one idea that she immediately appeared in front of the porter of the detachment. And the next second, Chan slashed his team member with a dagger, inflicting a mortal wound to him. Drinking blood, whether the wounded asked why his commander treated him so much. The hunter's hand closed the porter's neck, reply that he was the only member of the team that was easy to replace. Zhen repeated that the guy could bring at least some benefit, and because of the diagnosis he had made for a long time, he would not have handed it out for a long time. The captain was convinced that Hao Zhen was to blame for himself not to defend himself, discarding him to the monster. The attention of the Titanic Snake immediately attracted a member of the hunting team that rolled on the ground. The wounded guy ultimately stopped, after which he began to stop coughing. The beast of the 5th level decided not to miss the opportunity to enjoy such easy prey, and attacked the hunter. Watching how the mouth of the snake was approaching him, Hao Zhen could not believe that he would die in this way. The guy remembered how his mortally wounded mother made a promise from him that he would look after his sister. With tears in her eyes, the woman asked her son to survive and become a strong man. Being at death, Li, to his surprise, found that there was a symbol under him that had acted on his body. On the stage in front of the crowd of many girls, a giant red beam appeared from the sky. In his very center, the guy's silhouette appeared that he firmly stood on stage in front of the audience. The stranger was Hao Zhen, who was now dressed in a completely different suit. While the young man was surprised where his wounds disappeared, one of the girls exclaimed that Nico managed to call a man. Girls with wings and tails began to admire that the old scroll still worked. Beautiful creatures noted that the called guy looked quite attractive. In addition to tails with wings, the girls also had horns on their heads that they could not help but notice the strong magical aura of the young man. Hao Zhen wondered what happened around and was not a girl in front of him of the succubi. The guy also drew attention to the status window, from which it became clear that he became the bloody demonic god of the 1st level. From the study of their characteristics, whether one of the girls tore off that she stated that she created the ancient circle of call. Nico, being a beast of the 3rd level, which was very frightened when a powerful stream of magic burst from the circle. The mutating beast said that she swore to the young man in complete and unconditional fidelity. After these words, a notification appeared before the demonic god, which said that the guy received his first satellite. From the description of the satellite, it was clear that Nico belonged to the Pekab race, and had an affection level of 88%. The young man blurred in a smile when he found out that when a satellite of complete attachment to him reaches him, the guy could move her to his harem. From that moment on, Hao Jin realized that he had gained force, superior to evolutionary, thanks to which he would be able to take revenge. The satellite of the demonic god, leaning against the young man, asked him if everything was in order because he poked a finger into the air. The girl decided that the master was sleeping for too long. His body did not obey, so she offered to move a little. Somewhat embarrassed, the owner of the succubus confirmed that he was agreeing with her, causing a storm of emotions in the ward. Nico said that she would love to help the master, for whom she would be an honor to help him. Sukub said that she had no experience in providing such assistance, but vowed to do everything possible to satisfy the owner. The girl's colleagues began to be indignant, as they themselves wanted to be in her place, claiming that they were more worthy for such a thing. As soon as the guy realized what the succubus had in mind, he immediately abandoned his words. Such a reaction was somewhat upset by the girl, and her affection fell to 85%. The young man realized that he should not say that, since the key feature of the system was the attachment of the wards. In order to be able to take revenge on his death, the idea arose in the guy's head to bring the attachment of the succubus to the maximum. Hao Jin answered Nico that she understood him correctly, and that she, like all the girls here, were just beautiful. The young man repeated that he had never seen the women like them, whose words instantly embarrassed the mutated beast. The owner's words made the girl's attachment to 90%. Lee explained his refusal by the fact that he was just called up, because of which he was a little out of himself. And in order to return to normal, he needed energy. The ward began to argue that if its owner, the demonic god, needed energy, then he had in mind simple blood. Then Nico removed her hair from her neck, leaving her to her master, offering him to treat. As soon as the guy saw the pulsating artery, something was awakened inside him, most likely due to vampire instincts. The young man could no longer restrain himself and reached for the alluring neck of his companion, exposing his fangs. As soon as the guy dug into the girl's flesh, she cried out plaintively, but her attachment grew to 92%. Letting drool with pleasure and tears of joy, Nico caught himself thinking that she was a single whole with their master. As soon as Hao Jin was tasting blood, he increased his characteristics of power by 1 unit, gaining the skill of Bloody Merger. The guy found out that this skill allows you to get 1 unit for a random characteristic, that she worked only once on every woman. Lee was sure that he had the opportunity to receive free characteristics points, since he had plenty of girls. Demonic God considered this ability a good start in order to become stronger. Having called the companion to himself, Hao Jin said that he needed as much blood as possible. Everything shook in anticipation. The girl asked the master not to deny himself and drink as much as he needed. But the guy hastened to upset the succubus and specified that he needed not only Nico blood, but also the blood of the rest. The young man repeated that he needed the blood of women, and the more, the better for him. The eyes of those present girls immediately lit up that they wanted to experience the same as their colleague during a bite. Hao Jin, watching the gleam in the eyes of the succubus, called everyone to himself. The next moment, the guy's fangs stuck into another girl, increasing his endurance by 1 unit. After that, another girl from the crowd, due to her blood, increased the characteristics of the intelligence of the master. Also, along with these skills, the guy's dexterity increased, and behind her spirit, strength, again dexterity, intelligence, and everything is new. The girls were delighted, because they never experienced this, and even though the place from the bite hurt a little, their heart was ready to jump out of the chest. Each of the succubs noted that they and Mr. Souls seemed to merge into one. Lee was pleased that he used a bloody merger on each of the girls in front of him. Thanks to him, the young man scored a whole bunch of points of characteristics in the shortest time. But what was even more surprised by Hao Jin was that the bodies of the succubus were so sensitive, which was why their affection for him grew. In the late evening, the demonic god went with his assistants to the city of Tsukuba. Nico, so far none of the colleagues saw her, decided to secretly get into the chambers of her master. The girl introduced herself to the guy, suggesting that he was most likely tired of the crowd bites. Climbing the bed, the body of the mutated beast, everything trembled from each movement. Lee's companion said that since the taste of her, she had not left an exciting sensation, wanting to strengthen them with the master connection. Nico was convinced that, since she and Hao Jin were left alone, the best moment to become a real succubus would no longer be. Having jumped right on the master, the succubus stated that she would be on top, but something embarrassed her. Being on top of the guy, the girl could not help but notice that something was wrong with him. To dispel her doubts, she raised her blanket up to see the young man. The lining did not let the beast fail, because in bed, instead of the demonic god, there was a log. Nico was upset, deciding that the master had already found someone who was more important to him. But the guy's subordinate was mistaken, because at that time he was in the cemetery, studying his characteristics. Despite the fact that Hao Johnny had to spend the whole day on the collection of blood of the succubus, he was still the first level. And now, in order to raise the level, the vampire needed a good fight. After that, the young man will be able to take revenge on Chen Zizheng for betraying him, leaving him to tear the snake. Based on the experience of hunting in the detachment, the guy felt dark energy in this place and was sure that he should live undead. Then the demonic god released his magical aura in order to attract the enemy. The guy's trick worked, because ghostly lights began to appear after him, which they asked who dared to break their peace. Residents of the cemetery began to acquire outlines, exclaiming that they found the one who violated their eternal peace. In the end, the enemy showed his appearance that he was a faceless ghost of the first level. The mutated beast attacked the vampire, wanting to kill him in any possible way. Hao Johnny was enough only one blow to defeat such a weak enemy. However, the monsters were not going to stop after their comrade died at the hands of the young man. The same fate awaited against the faceless ghosts, for which there was enough only one blow. With each defeated opponent, the newly made hunter received experience points. The more the guy destroyed the enemies, the more performances he received, which he could spend in the status window. The guy continued to scatter right and left faceless ghosts, pumping his level. As a result, he received a new skill of a crimson flash, which made it possible to make 2 quick jerks every 5 seconds. After graduating from the battle, Hao Zhen finally felt what the evolutionary ones felt all this time. For the whole time spent in the cemetery, the young man managed to reach the 8th level, as well as distribute the obtained points of characteristics. Most of all, power, dexterity, and endurance influenced combat skills. While they had nothing to do with the Crimson Flash, the guy decided to distribute the points received in this way. Put everything into force and endurance. However, the vampire did not have time to do this. A notification of danger arose immediately. Behind him, a large mutated beast of the 2nd level arose that he bore the name of the Butcher. The enemy threw his gigantic bloodied T-sack into the demonic god that he stuck right into the ground. At the last moment, Hao Zhan dodged the attack that he appreciated the dexterity of the 2nd level beast. As it turned out, the Butcher was not the only opponent, and the hook of the second enemy was already rushing across. Thanks to the skills, the young man dodged another attack, which instead of him was struck by the grave plate. Having landed, the vampire noticed that the names over the faceless ghosts became green. That from now on, they did not pose a threat to him. At this time, the names of the butchers shone in yellow, which prompted the guy to think that they were enemies of his level. Both 2nd level beasts stood in front of the young man, preparing for a joint battle. However, who would not stand in front of Li Haojie, the guy did not intend to lose, having received a second chance from fate. The eyes of one of the butchers suddenly lit up with a bright light, which meant that the monster was moving into a berserk regime. The next moment, the enemy brought down his gigantic cleaver on the guy, but once again missed. Li stopped dodging and decided to inflict at least one blow to the enemy in order to test his strength. But as soon as the guy hit the monster with his foot on the head, he didn't even move. To his surprise, Hao Zhan discovered that the 2nd level animals were much more powerful, and they could not be so easy to defeat with their bare hands. And while Li was busy with one butcher, his colleague has already wrapped his chain around the young man. The next moment, the chain closed, but the enemy of the monsters inside was no longer there. The vampire, thanks to the pumped dexterity, fled from another trap, which he almost fell into. Since the butchers attacked at the same time, covering each other, Li decided to arm themselves with a broken iron sword, which he gave out of the enemy's body. Although the weapon was not the highest level, it should have been enough for several blows. Finding the enemy that he was trying to sneak up at the back unnoticed, the beast brought down his weapon on him. This time the guy could not dodge, and he blocked the butcher's attack-acquired weapons. Hao Zhan was not inferior in a direct collision with the enemy, since almost all glasses invested in force. At some point, Li managed to recapture the butcher's attack, after which he decided on a counterattack. Meanwhile, the mutating beast tried to maintain balance, after the young man spread their weapons. But as soon as the enemy returned his stability, he lost sight of the enemy. And while the butcher tried to figure out where he had gone, the brilliance of the blade flashed over his head. The guy, throwing a broken sword over his head, said that it was too late to twist his head. Approaching the mutated beast, the vampire's eyes were filled with blood that he was tired of repeating the death of the enemy. One such blow was enough to stop the enemy of the 2nd level. Hao Jan did not expect that for one butcher he would receive 2 levels at once, which made the battle only more interesting. The young man, having reached the 10th level, received the skill of Bloody Burial, which is able to call on a bloody swamp, slowing down enemies and causing them damage. The mutating beast screamed heart, rendingly, and the inscription over his head was painted green. The guy suggested that the enemy was missing his partner, paying attention to the inscription. The vampire turned to the monster, explaining to him that from now on he was not an opponent of his level. Hung with a chain, the butcher threw a hook into the young man who did not like the statement that he would soon meet his colleague. Hao Jen easily dodged the attack, for which now, with an increase in the level, it was slow. Li, although he fought a little, he had plenty of battles, and therefore had some ideas about various animals. The young man now was not difficult to predict the enemy's attack, using his pumped skills, and just on this enemy the vampire decided to test the bloody burial he had just received. The next second, the butcher was in a bloody swamp, which unexpectedly formed under him. After that, oblong sharp spikes arose from the swamp that pierced the enemy's body. This was the last attack, after which the monster died, and Li received another increase in the level. The young man remained delighted, seeing his own eyes, which the resulting skill is capable of. After that, Hao Jan received the title of Murderer of the Undead, which gave his owner 5% to damage against the undead. By the next day, studying the status window, the demonic god noted that he advanced very far in the pumping of the level. The guy suddenly received a notification of the daily task, which was required to be completed within the indicated period. Li, although he did not fully understand what kind of task it was, the additional reward was never superfluous. The vampire was disappointed when he found out that he needed to perform a bloody merger, otherwise he would lose 5 points of one of the characteristics. The task was complicated by the fact that Hao Jen drank the blood of all the succubus in the village, and the task was required to be completed until the next dawn. But the guy immediately dawned on, because he guessed where he could get the woman he had untouched in this wilderness. The choice of the demonic god fell on a faceless ghost, whom he defeated last night. The young man believed that although the beast was a ghost, but at the same time he was a woman. Hao Chan exposed his vampire fangs in the hope that his cunning plan would work, but unfortunately, the bloody merger did not work because the body's body had already begun to rot. The guy did not despair, since the ghosts were still pleasing around, and at least one merger was supposed to happen. Having tried each of the ghosts, Li was waiting for the same deplorable result. The vampire reproached himself for the fact that he had to think in advance, and not absorb the blood of all the succubus in the village at once. In a fit of anger, Hao Jen shouted that he needed a woman, wondering where they all suddenly went. And while the owner of the Sukabov was beside himself from rabies, his companion enjoyed being in the chambers of the master. It seemed to the girl that she was in the arms of the owner, since his smell was still in bed. Being very attached to Li, the succubus felt the wild desire of her master. Turning away from the pillow, the young man subordinate to the conclusion that he really needed her at this moment. Meanwhile, 2 hunters traveled through the forest that focused on a strong emission of energy. The guy who was driving was claimed that the energy was unique and belonged to the extremely rare mutated beast. His partner was configured quite skeptical, as the beast could be really strong. The head of the guys under the pseudonym Polar Rose claimed that cowardice is not characteristic of the company's employees. Li Zhu assured that while she was next to her subordinates, nothing unforeseen would happen. Although the team was not the only one who had eaten this energy, they had to be the first to come to place. Li Haojian was extremely surprised when a car drove up to him in the middle of the forest. Everything that was interested in the young man at that moment, whether the woman was inside the jeep, 2 guys got out of the car, from the conversation of which we could conclude that they were looking for exactly from whom magical energy emanated. The vampire was upset when he saw the guys who also hunted him here. But the next moment, the situation fundamentally changed when the female leg appeared from the car. Li Zhu determined that the goal was a vampire, but did not even want to stir his hands due to the fact that he was a 2nd level. The boss told his people to deal with the mutated beast, and then hit the road. Hao Jen could not compete with the Polar Rose, since she had a gold rank, against which the guy had no chance. The status of a woman's subordinates was also serious, but Li was not going to give up so easy. Suddenly, the enemy in front of the participants of the 4th team evaporated. The woman, although she noticed the vampire that she was behind her, but did not have time to do anything. The next step of the demonic god was to tightly grab the waist of Li Zhu with both hands. From such a capture, the boss of the hunters involuntarily shuddered. Along with this embarrassed, after the young man grabbed his prey, he did not know what to do next, since this was a novelty for him. The hunters for animals immediately demanded from the vampire so that he would immediately let go of the polar rose. The woman asked the beast who attacked her for what purpose he began to hug her. Thrusting with a sharp fang, the guy asked for forgiveness, adding that he had no other choice. After that, Hao Zhen thrust fangs into the neck of Li Xue, thereby completing a daily task. With annoyance in her voice, the woman said that a man had never touched her before. The head of the armed guys tried to get together with the forces to answer the vampire, and subsequently created a large energy ball, which threw the beast away from her, insisting that he did not go beyond the permitted. The shockwave was so strong that the young man crashed into a tree so much that he took his spirit. However, the guy did not see anything bad in his actions, surprised that he earned such a cold attitude towards himself. The woman explained that the vampire not only dared to touch her, but also left marked her neck. Li Xue was ready to calm down after whether she turned the ice into a block, even though her affection for the guy grew to 30%. Finding the status over the woman's head, the guy guessed that she was a cold nature with a soft heart. The head of the fourth team of evolving companies, Hongchen, stated that the guy was not mistaken. Having shouted the enemy, Hao Zhen realized that the woman was not going to kill him, so he had a chance to escape. Suddenly, the vampire felt the presence of another hunters nearby, and literally at the same second, from behind the trees in his direction, a gold card fired by the enemies emerging. Li Xue, having defended the young man, intercepted the map flying towards him, blocking the attack of rivals. The woman demanded that the owner of a bizarre weapon appear before her. At the request of the Polar Rose, two guys left their shelter, one of whom stated that it would not hurt the mistress. Two guys were a gold rank, the lower and higher, who decided to help the hunter who never dared to attack the vampire. Hao Zhen found it on his mind that he was not his day today, since there were already 3 hunters with red titles to hunt for him. Li Zhuo asked the guys to keep the crowns wider to the proposal to leave the beast to them, since he was not needed by a woman. The lady claimed that the vampire would not go to the elite center, with which the young man was completely agreeing. The woman insisted that the young man belonged to Hongchen, while her attachment grew to 40%. After the words that the players from another clan will have to deal with Mrs. Xu, Li praised her, increasing the affection by another 5%. Hao Zhen confessed the subordinates to his new companion, assuring that they would not lose to the clowns from the elite center. To the chagrin of rivals, negotiations for the mutated beast failed. Zhengzhe said that the hunters missed his chance, after which he attacked them with gold cards. Raising her hand up, the woman stopped the cards flying into them thanks to the force field. In response to such a weak attack by members of the elite center Li Xu, Buren had a bump on opponents. The holder of gold cards, unlike his partner, could not hold his eyes open due to severe frosty wind. A hunter with a title of lower gold said that their enemy created a convenient battlefield for them. The snow released by a polar rose did not reach a young man who, in turn, was not going to get involved in a fight. Having rushed into the air, the boss of the fourth team told their people to look after the opponents. Finding over Zhengzhe, the woman began to attract airstreams to herself, creating something dangerous from them. Having gained strength, Li Xu brought down her crowned reception of an ice song on rivals. As soon as she spoke the name of her attack, she threw a giant ice rose into the owner of gold cards. Zeichi considered such an attack by mockery, since no one fought with the help of flowers. And while the guy was busy with reasoning, an ice rosebud fell on him with a roar. The subordinate mistresses praised their boss with might and main, claiming that she was the power of Hongchen. When the cloud of dust from the blow was stopped, Zhengzhe appeared in front of the hunters, frozen inside the ice flower. His partner was outraged, because he did not know how he would explain to his father that the hunter had lost to a woman. The polar rose warned the young man that his turn had come, but the enemy was sure that the woman did not understand the situation. While the warring clans found out the relationship, several arrows flew out of an unknown direction. With tips in the form of hearts, they landed in Hongchen hunters, which froze in surprise on the spot. In a matter of seconds, both guys remained motionless, turning into stone statues. The hunters who fought against each other could not understand what was happening, deciding that another competing side appeared. The released arrows belonged to Nico, that she was finally happy to find his master. Hao Zhen was pleasantly surprised by the appearance of his assistant, that he came to his aid in time. Sukub confirmed that she had felt the need to help its owner, because of which she flew to him. Li Xue was shaking the fact that the vampire exchanged with his companion courtesy. The boss of the fourth team did not understand why she was so annoyed by the flirting of the beast with his assistant. Seeing herself that she was angry due to the transformation of her people into stone, the polar rose demanded that the guys return to normal. However, the hunter from the elite center did not give his rival the opportunity to get away from the battle with him. With one blow, The guy who seemed like a fragile adversary threw Sue from himself. Leaving the trace behind him, the woman crashed into the trees with a grand scale that were behind her. Observing the fight of the owners of gold titles, Haojin came to the conclusion that he had a single chance against the hunters. While the vampire was thinking about a secret reward, for which he was ready to take a chance, the succubus simply did not want to throw his master. The guy suited that, together with a rare beast, he would receive a succubus, that his father would really like it very much. The hunter assured that he would do everything so quickly that the enemy would not feel anything. The girl shot a dozen arrows at the young man, ready to fight for her master to the last. But as it turned out, the arrows for the hunter did not apply the slightest damage, which fought off them with his energy. Having beaten off Nico attack, the guy jumped on it, claiming that these arrows should only scare people from Hongqin. Literally a moment before Yu Wen found himself near the girl, a vampire arose between them. The hunter did not have time to grab the prey, as her trace caught a cold, hugging only air with his hands. Yu Wen wondered that the second-level beast was able to escape from him. Having spent all a possible crimson outbreak to save the succubus, Haojin understood that he had nowhere else to escape. Li did not understand why the girl's attachment did not grow after he saved her. This happened due to the fact that the girl considered herself useless, swearing herself to try more. But the vampire believed differently, claiming that it was not the time to ask for forgiveness to his companion. Approaching the lips of the master, Nico thought whether there was now a right time for such a moment. But the girl quickly threw away bad thoughts from herself, deciding to fulfill the will of the owner, kissing him. The hunter began to watch such a scene, not even suspecting that the attachment to the girl had grown to 99%. A participant in the elite center was shaking with anger, accusing opponents of their animal instincts. The guy believed that if not for him, the animals would give themselves will, for which they should have paid. Haojin strained greatly, since only 1% was not enough to obtain a reward. Told him that he would be captured, the vampire continued to kiss his companion, not even suspecting what appeared under his feet. Another obstacle appeared in front of the hunter again, the origin of which he did not immediately determine. The demonic god, along with the succubus, were protected by a huge ice ball. The guy claimed that Li spared Sue out of diplomatic reasons, but the woman did not believe him. The mistress said that this vampire was her property, whom she would not give without a fight. Nico attachment, meanwhile, grew to 100%, due to the fact that the master kissed her in the heat of the battle. Li received a secret reward in the form of a bloodthirsty beak, which allowed the use of the power of the bloody demonic god for 10 minutes. After that, the ice cube was shrouded in red energy that he was not able to restrain it. Following this, a giant beam of powerful energy, which was visible from everywhere, broke out of it. The sight was so unexpected that both hunters froze for a moment. In front of the Yu, we were a mutating beast, which he recently intended to attack. Watching indecision in the opponent's eyes, the vampire rushed the hunter to continue the offensive. The guy was unable to move, frightened by the fact that such a terrifying force took up the second-level beast. The demonic god said that he gave his opponent a chance to attack himself. Putting his hand in front of him, the vampire lured the enemy to him alone by the power of thought that he became equal to his opponent. Yu Wan tried to understand why the body stopped obeying him, how suddenly he was in the hands of the beast. The hunter asked the vampire to spare him, admitting that he had previously been right when he talked with him. But the prayers of the participant of the elite center did not work. But Li himself reminded his enemy that he had previously talked with him differently. Clutching his hand, the beast forced the young man to spit blood, which did not leave attempts to pray forgiveness. Hao Jin replied that he himself was recently in the place of Yu Van, from which it was possible to get rid of it painlessly. However, Chen Zizhen was from the enemy's enemy group, which did not play his goals on his hand. The mutated beast threw the poor fellow up, freeing his neck for a moment from the capture. And when the guy fell down, he hit him in his stomach, putting his entire acquired power. Drafting the earth, Yu Wen Kubaram rolled towards the ice dungeon of his comrade. Continuing to swell the blood, the hunter hooked the block of ice, after which he stopped, flying into the ground. When the smoke from the blow was scattered, a crippled young man appeared on the battlefield, which he could only quit. Inspecting his hand, Li did not cease to admire the power of the bloody demonic god. Li Jue could not believe that the vampire in front of her hid such terrifying power, clearly succumbing to her in the battle. And while the hunters were horrified by the power of the vampire, his companion, on the contrary, was fascinated by her. Having got out of the ice dungeon, Zhengzhe decided to fight against the mutating beast. The guy assured that he would fight seriously after he saw the tricks of his enemy. Li Haojin straightened his cloak, which only impudent the hunter into bewilderment. without realizing that he had yet thought up. As it turned out, the young man activated the Scarlet Storm, calling the whole army of bats. Ji, in every possible way, tried to dismiss the prefixed creatures that they strove to crawl into his eyes. In a matter of seconds, bats stuck the guy so tightly that they completely hid him from outsiders. Just a few seconds passed when the animals scattered to the sides, leaving only the skeleton from the enemy. When the remains of Zhengzhe collapsed to the ground, the vampire received 5 levels of increase at once. Hao Jan was not opposed to get such a reward after the battle with the enemy of the gold level, opening a Scarlet Storm for himself. Yu Wen, who was still alive, asked the Beast of Mercy after he saw what happened to his colleague. Having arrived at the hunter, the vampire asked him to repeat what he wanted, but everything turned out to be just banal. The young man repeated that if the enemy releases him, then his father, the head of the elite center, would do anything for the beast. Li took pity on the young man, deciding to help him get home, for which the hunter was grateful to him. Wen showered the monster with gratitude, but he only denied, accustomed to doing one good thing a day. But as soon as the son of the head of the elite center to rise high, as a vampire threw him as far as possible. Women were surprised, bewitchedly watching the young man burst over them like a rocket. The Polar Rose noticed that the hunter really flew towards the city, as the vampire promised. The evolutionary developed such a speed that he easily pierced hard rocks of rocks. And having made such a way, he nevertheless returned home to the elite center, flying there with a deafening roar. Hao Zhen, after the victory over the Golden Ran hunter, received 5 more level increase. The fact that the demonic god increased his level meant that the hunter still reached the house. Realizing that with each level he needed more and more experience, the young man returned to women. At that time, while Sukub admired her master, Li Jue was scared by the further actions of the enemy. Li turned to his companion, who needed her direct participation in one case. As soon as the girl approached her master, he activated the skill of soul resonance. Sukub was restless, as she felt that a certain energy was gathering in her chest. In front of the mutated beast from her chest, the sacred blade of the master began to appear. The vampire's companion asked her owner to get a weapon out of it, but to do it slowly. Grabbing the handle of the sword, Hao Zhan explained to Nico that they were such a resonance of souls with her. Carefully, the guy took out a weapon out of his companion, which could only do when her affection reached the maximum. The resonance of shower was the skill, which allowed with the help of the satellite's body to call on a special equipment. Li recognized the blade that Nico granted him the name Bradso, known as a bloody blade. The boss of the 4th team of Hongchen was shocked that the guy took out a weapon from the chest of Sukub. The woman was sure that the beast would destroy her without a sword, so she did not understand why he called the sword. The vampire asked the Polar Rose to stop inventing, and then waved a blade in front of her. The weapon of the beast magically torn all the outerwear from the Hongchen employee. The hunter did not immediately realize what she suddenly became so fresh, to the last hoping that her guesses were incorrect. The woman insisted that if the beast wanted to kill her, then she would not interfere with him, but did not understand what her clothes prevented him from. The guy replied that he simply checked the weapon. However, if the woman did not want to finish her colleagues, then she should follow him. Li Xue worried that for a conversation the vampire dragged her into the thicket, where there was no one nearby. The frightened Polar Rose suddenly realized that the monster who took her hostage was planning. The woman had only one reason that could explain why the vampire spared her earlier. Hongchen's employee was sure Li fell in love with her at first sight, finding him also an attractive young man. The hunter imagined how the guy greatly pressed his hand to her neck, which caused her ambiguous feelings. Finding that Hao Zhen put his hand on a tree near Li Shu, the woman decided that her fantasy would come true. Li asked the hunter to repeat the words for him that she should swear in eternal fidelity. When asked what this meant, the young man repeated that he did not allow his companion to ask questions. Somewhat embarrassed, the woman still obeyed the vampire and repeated the words of the oath. After these words, the mistress officially became the second companion of the demonic god, whose attachment was 45%. The vampire praised the woman, but due to the fact that he was so close to her, Li Shu decided that he wanted to kiss her. Enjoying her first kiss, the Polar Rose has already begun to involuntarily cover his eyes. But instead of a kiss, the guy announced that there would be no more awards, and that if his companion wanted, he could take his subordinates with him. In the end, the mutated beast took the word from the woman that she would not tell anyone about him. After that, referring to the lack of time, the guy said goodbye to Hongchen's participant. Although she was embarrassed from this action, the hunter called to her new owner. Turning around, Li asked that his companion still wanted to learn from him. The woman was embarrassed by thoughts that her subordinates, when they come to their senses, would see her in this form. Li Zhuo, having thrown over the vampire's cloak, noted that the clothes were still smelled of a young master. Such a gesture of the mutated beast increased the attachment of his companion to 50%. The late evening came, and the demonic god finally returned to the village of Sukubov. The guy was pretty tired over the past day, but reached the 21st level, having also acquired a bunch of skills. Upon reaching the new level of How, the bloody massacre was available in which he could take part. If it takes part in the battle, he will not receive experience, and the wounds received will not be able to recover, even though the reward for passing will be significant. The vampire should first increase its skills before participating in such a battle. However, the guy lacked patience, and literally a few seconds he took part in the bloody massacre. The young man was ready for any risks, because until that moment they were all fully justified. Hao Zhen, agreeing to participate in a duel, entered a large portal that arose in his room. Finding himself on the other side, the young man was pleasantly surprised that he was allocated special clothes, even though the place itself was little like the arena. The notification that has surfaced over the head of the young man invited the participant to choose a weapon in the preparation room. After that, several types of weapons for the battle appeared in front of the vampire. The knight's two-handed sword increased force by 30 units, while the dagger increased dexterity by the same amount. However, the solar shield increased endurance, and the great Sakura evenly distributed the characteristics between force and endurance. Lee did not know that the weapon increased the characteristics of their owner, only he never fought with an axe or a sword. But in the training room there was also another strange weapon that the young man could not miss. Among the stitching objects was an arcuate yellow cucumber, which when he entered the enemy caused him a short spasm. The guy chose the vegetable. Despite his shape, the cucumber had a very useful effect, which could open up to the fullest thanks to the imagination. He also needed to choose an increase for the upcoming battle, despite the fact that the guy did not even know who his opponent would be. Of the three options, Hao Zhen chose a breakdown of protection, reducing the protection of targets at every hit, after which he moved to the arena. Having teleported, the mutated beast was in the place, which reminded him of the Colosseum. But instead of ordinary spectators, there were many skulls and ghosts soaring in the air. The commentator's voice announced that there were 50 levels with a defender in each of them in total in the arena. The girl, going down to the arena, added that the award for the victory would not disappoint the participant. Commented on the upcoming bloody massacre of the charming demoness of Sally. The girl presented today's guest, asking if a powerful vampire could surprise them. The defender of the first level was a sorceress from a dark forest, representing evil signs and death. As soon as Sally announced the enemy Lee, the gates opened, and it immediately turned to the arena with a deadly coolness. Having met with the sorceress, Hao Zhen asked what happened to her and why she cried. A girl named Banshee explained that she felt the death of all mortals, and mourned those whose deadline was coming to an end. The sorceress also stated that she felt a strong aura of death around the vampire, which is why she cried. Hao Zhen did not understand what the defender of the level was hinted at, over which there was no indicator to everything else. However, it was and did not matter to the guy that he knew what power he got by releasing a flock of bats on the enemy. Banshee remained standing still, despite the danger impending on her. In a split second, the girl dealt with a flock of bats with long claws. The sorceress fell with lightning speed from her place, leaving a small hole in the ground. The defender, having been behind the vampire, said that the young man was not an equal to him, swinging his sharp claws. Entering the attack of Banshee, Lee asked if the girl had an idea of tactics. The demonic god confirmed that if he could not defeat the opponent in a distant battle, he went to his neighbor. In the face of the sorceress was a yellow cucumber that he was inexorably approaching her. An indignant rival knocked out a strange weapon from the hands of a mutated beast. The vegetable, quickly rotating, began to describe circles in the air, moving away from the vampire further. Sally suggested that Banshee had a sharp aversion to oblong objects. Nevertheless, Hao Zhen managed to fix the sorceress in a very peculiar position. With all her might, trying to break out of the capture, the girl lost her balance and fell. The young man claimed that the level defender lost control of one glance at his weapons. Having hung over the girl, the vampire said that he never lost his rude power. Assuming that the opponent is inconvenient to be in this position, Lee invited her to give up. But instead, the girl burst into a piercing, heartbreaking scream. The enemy's cry was so sudden that the vampire for a moment lost control of himself. The sorceress took advantage of this moment that she threw the enemy away from her. The young man, along with the cucumber, flew into the wall of the arena, leaving a small recess in it. Wiping the sweat from his face, Hao Zhen noted to himself that he could not underestimate the Banshee, which had such a powerful skill. The commentator of the fight told the audience that the first-level defender applied Alpha Void, Each enemy who will hear him will fill the heart with original horror, which will later lose any will to battle. The demonic god needed to gain strength of the spirit in order to withstand the attack of the sorceress. Watching how hard the guy was, Sally was ready to declare the outcome of this battle. Suddenly, did he find himself in a strange place in front of which the woman was, asking if he had forgotten her face. In the eyes of the young men, tears came up when he saw his dead mother in front of him. The woman convinced Hao Johnny not to be afraid that she was really, wondering if he was hard in her absence. Hand-ing through his hand, the guy's mother invited him to stay with her forever in order to be together. Seeing how the son does not dare, the woman insisted on her, repeating the time that they would spend only together. The woman did not understand why. A step away from her, the guy stopped, wondering if her son did not miss her. With indifference in his voice, the guy replied that he had already been betrayed. He fell ill with an incurable disease, and by some miracle, he managed to survive. But what was more important, the vampire's mother would never have called him into the afterlife, as she told him to look after his younger sister. The realization that the mother of the young man gave her life for his sake gave an unprecedented force that mutated beast. Banshee could not believe that her strongest attack did not work on the enemy. Armed with an arched cucumber, Li Haojian was ready to continue the fight with a defender of the first level. Having passed the enemy's power, the young man activated the art of hidden blood, gradually dissolving in space. The sorceress did not expect the vampire to have a disguise skill. Although such a skill was not a problem for her, the girl used Beta 1, who turned her energy into a powerful salvo of weapons. According to Sally, this Banshee technique was worse than the previous one that arranged an erratic attack throughout the arena. Focused on a long attack, Banshee did not notice the enemy right under her nose. An irritated level of the defender of the level, the vampire shut her mouth with a yellow cucumber. Thus, the young man reduced the enemy's defense by 1%, thereby restoring a little health. The commentator of the bloody massacre could not believe that the mutated beast managed to interrupt the attack of Banshee. Having taken out the cucumber from the enemy's mouth, Haojian said that the most interesting was still ahead. Then he made an uncontrollable pressure of attacks with a cucumber, again activating the breakdown of the defense. Each cucumber blow reduced the defense of the sorceress, who did not even know about all the abilities of the young man. The girl did not understand why the cucumber possessed such a force, and why with every attack it became more painful. Hao Zhen, watching the enemy gradually losing his strength, said that he had not finished with her. In addition, the vampire activated the additional effect of the arcuate cucumber, paralyzing its goal. Banshee could no longer withstand such painful pain when her body stopped obeying. Thus, the mutated beast launched the defender of the first level back to the arena. The young man asked what his enemy would now do, whether she would continue to fight or surrender. The exhausted sorceress, without stopping sob, said that she was surrendering. If only the vampire stopped mocking her. From the gaze, Sally was trembling that she first saw something similar during the bloody massacre. Li asked the commentator to declare the results of the battle, as his enemy decided to surrender. The demon, declaring Li Haojian, added the winner that the guy deserved the right to fight at the next level. The vampire was pleased with the result, since in addition to passive strengthening, the skills glasses received a reward. However, the young man had the mind not to continue participating in the second level, so he decided to return after pumping stronger. The guy returned to the village of Sukubov that evening, but already without his clothes granted to him. A notification appeared before the hidden skill of the Will of the Winner, which was activated only after leaving the arena. The Will of the Winner made it possible to call on enemies defeated in the arena, making them their companions. Hao Chen noted to himself that thanks to this skill, a whole army would be able to call. The vampire drew attention to the fact that the light was burning in his room, and familiar sounds were also heard. Entering the room, the guy, to his surprise, discovered the companion that he was on the bed. Turning on the bed, Nico enjoyed the smell that her master left behind. But when the smell became much stronger, the girl opened her eyes to understand what it was connected with. The demonic god became embarrassed, so he asked his ward what she was doing. Sukub was embarrassedly justified that she had not done anything strange, as it might seem at first glance. The girl explained that she brought the master clothes, which she sewed all night to the size of the young man. Li thanked the companion, assuring her that this time he would not give the cloak she had made. Leaving the chambers of Hao Jiani, Nico convinced himself that the vampire almost in direct text admitted her love. The guy spent the whole night behind numerous battles, without even realizing that in the morning the orcs would attack the village of Sukuba. On one of the residents who announced an alarm, the enemy suddenly threw a rope. The leader of the monsters ordered to take everything that was poorly lying to his subordinates. The orcs were not distinguished by the mind and were flexible, thoughtlessly following their master. The mutated animals grabbed not only interior items, but also local residents. The orc demanded that the slaves are thoroughly connected by the succubus, while they will steal food, gold, and other treasures. Arrows with tips in the form of hearts flew into the heads of monsters that dared to attack the village. The leader of the monsters began to twirl his head, wondering who had enough impudence to attack them. Nico demanded that the orc let her go, comrades, and fail if he did not want to finish the same way as his subjects. The leader of the mutating animals did not understand how the girl was going to fight with him. Several improvised orcs attacked the barn from behind, which found the enemy by surprise. However, the monsters never reached their goal, as they were pierced by sharp pins. Each of them ran into a bloody burial, which from now on was not tied to a certain area. Having reached the second level, bloody spikes automatically pursued targets within their radius of attack. The demonic god himself came to the orcs, who was interested in who made a vanity in the morning. Putting his hand on his companion, Lee promised that he would deal with uninvited guests. The centurion orc asked what the vampire was doing to the succubs, advising him not to get involved in this matter. The guy replied that the blood of each of the succubs living in the village flowed in his veins. Without spending time talking, Haojan activated the skill of the Will of the Winner. Calling on Banshee, the sorceress immediately appeared in front of her master, which was very impressed by Nico. Sukuba could not believe that even the familiarians of her owner were so strong. The beast of the third level repeated that one woman would not do anything against hundreds of orcs. After these words, Banshee used Alpha Void to prove the opposite to the monster. The leader, along with his subjects, froze in place, being influenced by the voice of the sorceress. One of the minions of the centurion, realizing what terrible things he did in the past, decided to punish himself, piercing his sword. Following his comrade, another orc, considering himself a shame of the race, decided to commit suicide with the help of a club. However, with the leader of the animals, everything was different that until the last he fought with the voices in his head. The monster perked up, because on his shoulders lay the honor of the entire tribe, which he could not shame. But at the same moment to bite the language to create a knee in the jaw to the jaw to the jaw to the jaw, the young man repeated that the honor of the orc consisted of murder and robbery, so there was no broken penny, supposing that he was responsible for the lives of every resident of the village of Sukabov. Haojan hit the beast in the chest by force. The guy's blow was so strong that his enemy flew up high. Taking advantage of the moment, while the enemy at a distance from him, the vampire applied a crimson storm. But the orc continued to say that bats could not take his defense, and, if not for the Banshee, he would have gotten off in 2 counts with Lee. The young man believed that it was honest to fight against the monster in a crowd, because he also acted when he attacked the village. Banshee again demonstrated her vocal data in order to break the will of the enemy. Meanwhile, Nico brought down several dozen arrows at the centurion orc. After such manipulations, there was a deafening explosion that was supposed to defeat the monster on the spot. When the smoke from the explosion scattered, the leader of the orcs appeared, all in abrasions and wounds. The demonic god was of the opinion that condescension to the enemy was equivalent to cruelty towards himself. The vampire was sure that the enemy should be finished mercilessly when he was weak. Haojan asked if any of the girls was injured, but fortunately they got off with scurrying from the ropes. The succubi was grateful to the master for salvation, so they wanted to thank him. The guy expressed gratitude to his familiar for the fact that she showed herself perfectly during the first call. Banshee said that it was an honor for the servant to serve the master, and she was ready to fulfill any order. The vampire had just an important task for the girl that he asked to follow him. Having secluded, Lee bit his assistant by the neck, which is why she all melted due to the fact that the owner pressed her so close to him. The sorceress was slightly painful, but for the sake of the owner she was ready to endure anything, even his strange desires. The young man replied that the matter was not in his desires, but for the need to drink the blood of women daily in order to maintain strength. Haojan was surprised by the expression of his familiar face, suggesting that that one had anemia. The girl repeated that after yesterday's battle with a guy, every time she saw him, the body began to tremble on her own. Unable to endure this anymore, Banshee asked her owner forgiveness and was forced to leave. After these words, the girl disappeared, leaving the vampire with her thoughts that the sorceress was so sensitive. At this time, in the circle, the succubi discussed how to thank the master to save their village. Nico believed that due to the fact that Lee had bansheed and Li Shui, she was not interested in a guy who was only interested in battles and everything else. The vampire's companion seriously thought about what she could do different for her master.